Okay, everybody. Hi, I'm Jake Forsell. Welcome to seeing myself in the mirror. Welcome to Ein Keshatot, which means the spring of the arches. And we're here for something very special. We're going to see a Jewish village from about 1500, 1600 years ago. Its name in Arabic is El Kanatir, and it is brand new. It was just opened about a year and a half ago, and unfortunately, most of the time it's been open is because of the COVID, the corona. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk down, and we're going to walk down here, and this is the village in front of us here. There's the synagogue, and we're going to have a. So we're in the Golan Heights. I'll get a map out later and show you exactly where we are. And the important thing, the Jewish village was established here because there was a big spring here. And I understand we're going to see the spring house. I think that's that structure down there. We'll see it in just a moment. The Golan Heights today is an integral part of Israel. And it is an integral part of Israel because it was settled by Jews more than 2,000 years ago. So we see in the distance out there, it's a bit hazy today, but the Sea of Galilee is down there. We're looking southwest, and I'll get back on once we get down there. Okay, so as we walk down, we see the ruins of the village here, and this place was sort of forgotten about by time. It was discovered by Lawrence Oliphant in the 1890s. He was a eccentric English aristocrat who wanted to hasten the second coming of Christ by preparing the land of Israel for the end gathering of the exiles. Now, it was photographed in 1905 by German archaeologists. The synagogue was. That's the earliest photograph we have of the synagogue. But let me just flip this up here. The real interesting thing for me is that how this synagogue was excavated and how it was reconstructed. And we'll talk about that once we get there. But let's just look at, which is something you don't see a lot, is let's see what a house would have looked like back then. And here we see a courtyard, which was common to a few dwellings. And you have to remember that life back then, you lived with your family. In other words, your brother, your sister lived next door, your father lived across the way, your mother-in-law, everybody sort of lived together. And this clannishness, this way people lived was sort of nothing unusual in the area. And in Bedouin villages today in Israel, this is how they still live. Okay, so another interesting part of the story here is how everything survived so well, especially the synagogue. And the answer is an earthquake. Earthquakes are terrible natural disasters, but they're an archaeologist's best friend. So when we see the building here, what happened is that the village was destroyed by a very, very famous earthquake in 749 AD. It also destroyed a city called Beit Shan about 40 miles southeast of us. And when this happened, everything was sort of sealed in like a time capsule. So you have the main public buildings here, which is the synagogue we're going to get to in a moment, which collapsed on itself, but it's complete. So what you have is a 3D jigsaw puzzle with all the pieces mixed up. The question is, how do you put the puzzle back again? Well, I'll tell you that in just a moment. Okay, so let me get this off. Here we are at El Kanatir, which is Arabic for the place of the arches, and there are the arches, and they're quite impressive. And this is the interesting part. You see there's water here. Let's go get a close-up view here. You see there's water, and this is from a natural spring. And you'll also notice that there's a channel here, and you can see it's paved with those stones that are original from, a long time ago. So, and we can see now this is all what was here. You can see the water here, and this is a really, really, really impressive water system here. So we see that the water system even goes up over here, and you can see the water is really clear. It's spring water, so the people here could drink it. But what we think, why they invested so much time into building these arches wasn't to build a McDonald's, but water was used in the flax industry. So we think that here, having so much water, which you need when you're making clothing from flax, which was a quality item back then, it was good money. The people here, you can say, were in the shmata industry. They were making material. They were making a cloth to sell, and were not that far from one of the main east-west trading roads. So the place of the arches, here we are, El Kanatir. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, and you can see how this channel follows and goes down into probably where the people lived and worked. So for those of you who don't know, here's a little idea. You can see how the flax plant, which was grown here, you beat them the side of the pool, crush them, and then spin and weave the flax into cloth. So it was like all things back then. This was very, very, very labor intensive. So if we look up there, we see stones that were probably used, and they're probably doing it right here. Okay? So this is flax. I don't know about you, but I didn't know where flax came from till I became a tour guide. Let's continue on. Okay, my wife Grivka's just put in there in the background, has just pointed out this the area of the Jewish cemetery, and here we see one of the coffins which was in the ground and just had you can see the place where the lid would have been put on. So here we see two these stone coffins. They're not quite sarcophagi, they're not sarcophagus. And what's interesting is that the stream separated the living from the dead. So, you've got that expression, going across the Jordan, going on the other side of water. Here, this is what's happening literally. Okay, so we see the remains of homes here. We see the homes again were all built around a common court. Homes back then were very simple. 3 rooms on the ground floor, and then 1 room that was accessible from a ladder inside the home. And we'll meet up at the synagogue. We're coming to the synagogue here, and I just want to show you what the synagogue used to look like. So this is a reconstruction of the synagogue right there. And we're going to go inside. And by the way, the synagogue had 2 stories. What the second story was used for, we don't know. We're going to go inside the synagogue now. And make sure that's in there. And you'll notice that there's an entrance from the side. You can see the beautiful arch. We got a better view of it there. You can see the beautiful arch there, and this crossbeam. Now, as we go inside, this is very different from Galilean synagogues. And what is amazing here is this fantastic arc. So up there, you see there's a little staircase there. And I want you to look at, you can see here the artwork which is on here. Those are what are called floret designs. And then we see a menorah with the incense shovel, lulav, the palm branch, and the etrog, the citrus etrog. And then there's eagles. So these are motifs we find in synagogues all over. But notice that the synagogue this is the way to Jerusalem. That's south. And on the side of the synagogue are benches, just on this side. And then we see this fantastic synagogue floor in this sort of how many sides? 1, 2, 3, 4, octagonal shape. But the synagogue itself here is interesting because everything you see is original. There's nothing not original here. And the reconstruction here was done in a very interesting way. So when they got here in the we know about this place from already in the 1970s. But the archaeologists decide that they're going to rebuild it by using a very special technique. And they're going to photograph all the fallen stones with a 3D camera. And then they're going to drill a small hole in the stones, put in a chip that's sort of like its own security number, its own ID number. And then they're going to reconstruct the synagogue by reassembling it the way the rocks fell. So they built a huge crane above us here, and that crane just reassembled everything we see. Now, you see the windows, and what's interesting is, and I see in the windows are spaces, you can see that here. You'll see there's little holes to hold some sort of shutter. So the building was illuminated with those windows on one side. The question is, guys, what was on the second floor? Where was the staircase? Were men and women together, or were only men coming to the synagogue? Synagogues back then were used for 4 things. Number 1, for prayer. And then for the reading of the Torah and the Haftorah and the book of the prophets on Saturday, on Shabbat. And it was also used as a rabbinical court, but also was sort of like a hotel, for passing travelers, where they could be put up. And of course, if they wanted to pay something for their hospitality, they would. Okay, but also it could have been seen as an act of charity. So here we are in the magnificent, magnificent synagogue, El Kanatir, the spring of the arches. So just getting another view of the synagogue here. Okay, so This is the synagogue at El Kanatir, the spring of the arches. We don't know the name of the village, what the people here 16, 1700 years call the village itself. That's what we call it today. But this fantastic synagogue behind me on the Golan Heights, reconstructed in a radical way, really helps us to understand other synagogues from the time. So I'm Jacob Purcell, licensed tour guide. Thank you, and hope you'll join me on the next tour. Take care, stay safe, masks, wash hands, and social distance, please.